Well, hey, it's Wes, and today is finally the day. Thought this was coming for months, and all of a sudden at WPPI, which makes a lot of sense for Sony to release it on this day, Sony has announced the new a7 Mark III. And honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that they put in everything that they should have put in. They didn't seem to hold back anything in particular. So, let's start out. I'm going to go through the fine print, going to go through the little details so you don't have to. Quick rundown. Number one, sensor. Still 24.2 megapixels, but this is a new sensor. It is basically the same sensor out of the A9, but not stacked. So it's a backside illuminated sensor, 24.2 megapixels, goes up to 204,800 ISO, 15 stops of dynamic range. That's the same thing that they claimed with the a7iii Mark III. Now, in practice, most testers found that it was a little bit below 15, but still, that's a great improvement. 10 frames per second on mechanical or silent shutter. I think that maybe the autofocus might not work past 8, that's a little unclear right now. And in continuous mode, when you're rapid firing, this is the first Sony Alpha camera, mirrorless camera, that will do full 14-bit RAW in continuous mode. That's a pretty big deal. And when you're shooting fast, 177 image buffer, and that is rolling off onto the cards, which, just like the Sony A9 and the a7iii Mark III, unfortunately, one is UHS 2, one is UHS 1. That is probably because Sony execs outside of the imaging department insist that they have one card slot that is compatible with the Sony memory stick format, which nobody uses. But they don't have any UHS 2 / memory stick card slots to use for that. And so we get stuck with this. It's foolishness, but anyway, moving on. In the video realm, we have the same as the A9. We have 4K video, full frame from a 6K oversample, no pixel binning. But in addition, you get S-Log profiles, you get HLG. Doesn't look like they'll ever bring it for the A9, but you've got it in the a7 Mark III. Touched on this a little bit. What have we changed on the body? Well, instead of USB micro, like on the original and on the A9, we have, like on the a7iii Mark III, USB micro and USB-C. That's great to see. Faster transfer speeds. Great for tethering. They have a touchscreen on the back. Same flippy panel. It's not going to come out around to the sides, unfortunately. One of the biggest things that they touted for this was a 710-shot battery life. So we have the new Z-type battery, like in the A9 and the a7iii Mark III, jammed into this guy. And so this is supposed to have the best battery life of any mirrorless camera. I can believe it. On the A9, that is rated for less shots, you can easily crank out 2,000 shots on the electronic shutter, no problem. Autofocus. This is what I find the most interesting part about this camera. The autofocus system, 693-point phase detect, 425-point contrast. Now those numbers are very familiar. I'll tell you why. On the A9 you have a 693 phase detect autofocus system that also covers 93% of the sensor. So this is the same phase detect sheet across this sensor. But the A9 only has 25 contrast detect points. a7R III, 399 phase detect points in a smaller area, but 425-point contrast. So you have the phase detect system from the A9 coupled with the contrast detect system from the a7R Mark III. Why do we want this? Well, arguably, the 425-point contrast detect system on the a7R Mark III is better for eye detect autofocus. So the phase detect isn't what's telling the camera where a face is and where the eyeballs are. That's the contrast detect and the smarts inside the processor. So they talked a big game about the improved eye autofocus on this, and I would actually suspect that the a7 Mark III will give you better eye autofocus than the A9. What's the point of the A9 at all anymore? Well, I'll tell you. This new sensor is not a stacked sensor like in the A9. This does not have the ultra-high readout speed, it cannot do 20 frames per second, but the biggest difference is this. In the electronic shutter mode, the full silent mode, you still have the compromises of the previous generations. You're still going to have degraded ISO performance, you're still going to have some warping, some rolling shutter of the frame for things that are moving fast, and you're going to have much greater incidence of banding from artificial light sources. Now, I will admit this is making the value proposition of the A9, which is what I'm filming you on right now, much worse. This is becoming a more and more niche product the more cameras Sony releases. So now the A9 is becoming very much the ultimate silent shutter and the sports camera. As far as weddings go, the A7 Mark III is a fantastic value. It kind of trounces the competition for value per performance. We're talking $2,000 US or $2,600 Canadian. Am I going to be getting one of these? Probably eventually, don't tell my wife. It's a great camera. Am I going to be ditching the A7 Mark II? Don't cry. So, if anyone would like an A7 Mark II, hit me up in the comments. I'd be happy to sell it to you for a perfectly reasonable amount. If you have any questions about this, you have any comments, you have any thoughts about the A7 Mark III, do you think Sony's making too many cameras and not enough lenses? Again, hit me up in the comments. So, until next time, go take some photos.